Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to talk to you about math mistakes. This is a very autobiographical session because I made so many mistakes in learning mathematics as a homeschooled student, and I just want to kind of steer you clear of that. As a homeschooled parent. So I was homeschooled myself, K through 12. We did a lot of things well. Math wasn't one of them. So that's just the confession right out of the gate. And now I'm homeschooling my kids. I have 3 kids under 6. And also I'm the author of the Apologia math program that has just been so much fun. I used Apologia science when I was in high school. And so I was super excited when they asked me if I wanted to write a math program. We have 2 levels out. We just released them this spring. So they're brand new, hot off the presses. The orange books, level 1, that's for 1st grade. And the green books, level 2, is for 2nd grade. And those are available now. So if you want to grab them, that'd be great. But let me kind of jump in here with what I want to share today. So again, I was homeschooled, had a great education. My parents did a great job. But we made a lot of mistakes with mathematics. And I just want to say right out of the gate that now that I'm homeschooling, I do not look back and think like, oh, like my parents should have done a better job or anything like that. I have 3 kids under 6 and they had 4 kids under 5. So I have like no ill feelings whatsoever. But I have noticed that some of the painful experiences that I had trying to catch up in college, other homeschool students seem to share. And as I've talked with families, I tutor homeschool families. I've taught homeschoolers online. I teach at our co-op. There seem to be some commonalities with sort of like where we struggle. So I kind of boiled those down into 4 different mistakes, and then I'm going to give you solutions for each of those mistakes. So if I can just pull up, let me see here. Here we go. So, are you making these math mistakes? How to learn from the mixed up math education of Catherine Gomes. And I should say, I'm on Facebook at Catherine M. Gomes. That's my professional Facebook page where I have like ideas and what I'm doing with my kids. And I'm also on Instagram at Homeschool Math Mom. I don't know about you, but I have found Facebook and Instagram to be such a lifeline as we're all sort of distanced in homeschooling. So I would love to hear from you if you have questions, comments, like or follow. I'm really kind of benefiting from that sense of online community. So hopefully you will as well. All right, let's jump in. What is the first mistake that we can make in teaching math to our kids? Okay. So mistake number 1 is that we start with a poor vision and minimal goals. So when we set out to teach math, when we're starting to think about this upcoming school year, I don't know if you've started yet or you're thinking about starting, instead of looking at how great it can be, we tend to sometimes think of math as an obstacle that we need to overcome, or trying to view it as parents as like, okay, what is the minimum we have to do? What's required? Let's hit that, and that's all we're going to do. And I think there's a couple reasons for this. I just wanted to sort of share them with you because I think some of these we can have in common. So first of all, when we teach math to our kids, we bring our bad math experiences to the table. So when we show up as their teacher, whatever our experience was with math, we sort of share that with them. So if we had a negative experience or we didn't enjoy math or we felt we weren't very good at math or any of those feelings, we kind of bring that as their teachers. And so we can set them up for failure, not intentionally, but by saying things like, oh, we got to survive math, or what are we going to do for math this year? Those types of messaging, just because we're kind of having the framework of what it was like for us. Also, we can communicate negative expectations. I think it's so easy to do, but when you're hearing it as an outsider, you can hear sort of these views of like, oh, it's going to be hard, or telling our kids like, I know that math might be difficult this year. We're just going to struggle through, and not as much of a sense of like, let's have faith. Let's see how much we can learn. Let's have some excitement and that type of thing. And then we seek to do the minimum. I was so guilty of this in school, both in terms of how I approached individual lessons as a student, but also as a family. We did this when I was being homeschooled. We sought to do the minimum. I distinctly remember in 8th grade sitting down with my mom and us talking about high school math, and her sharing like, okay, our goal is we don't want you to get to calculus because, oh my goodness, calculus. We don't want to have to deal with that. So we planned back from this goal of avoiding calculus. So instead of looking at like, where are you now and how far could we get in high school, we had this sort of like avoidance plan. And then that totally backfired. Just to give you a background on what happened, I did avoid calculus. I did algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, and like a smattering of trigonometry was entirely my fault because I wasn't a very studious trigonometry student and I didn't apply myself. So I barely learned trigonometry. And then I went to the University of Pittsburgh and it was so difficult. Like I ended up being a math major, which was sort of this long story of how my interests changed. But in one semester of calculus, I had to relearn like 3 years of mathematics. So I realized not everyone becomes like a surprise math major, but all my siblings, we've all found that we used more math than we expected, and we would have benefited from a little bit more of a rigorous and faith-filled vision for math instead of trying to like, okay, let's see what's the smallest amount we can do. And I'm sharing that from sort of a high school perspective, but if you have younger kids, sort of the same thing applies. Like if you're approaching 3rd grade math and you're just thinking like, what is the least we have to cover? That's just such a small vision, and it'd be so much greater to think in terms of how far can our kid go and how can we explore and how much can they master? So how do we address this mistake? Oh, I'm sorry. Before I talk about that, I wanted to share this picture of the door because this is something I use with my math students to try to give them a sense of math as an opportunity. So for my students who seem strong in math or gifted in math, I talk to them about math being a door for them to lead them towards the opportunities that God has for them, or even the calling he might have for them. So if you have a kid, whether they're really young or they're in high school, and you see some math ability and you think, wow, like they might be called to engineering or medicine, or they might be able to get a scholarship, that's an opportunity to harness that talent and apply some hard work so that they can develop that ability. And God can use that then as a door into what he has for them, and like the field that he's going to use them in, or the calling that he has for them. Sometimes I hear sort of like this tone of like, my kid's good at math, so like we're just going to let them whip through their grade level book and then that's it. And I'm like, no. Like, there is always more math to learn. If your child is like excelling and you keep putting a challenge in front of them, who knows how far they could go? I mean, they could take college courses in high school, and then in college, they could discover something. Like there's so many possibilities. You don't have to worry about like hitting the ceiling on mathematics. That's not going to happen. And also, I think ability in math shouldn't be an excuse for coasting. So if you have a gifted student, let's challenge them, let's excite them, let's envision them to see where God can take them. And then, of course, we have another group of students, right? Not everybody is going to love math. Not everybody is going to say, I think this is like the area of gifting that I have in my life. I get it, right? We don't all excel in everything. So I have lots of students that I've taught who are like, Mrs. Gomes, like, I know you're excited about math and you love it, but I'm over it. It's not my thing. I love art, or I'm a really good writer, or it seems like God has gifted me in this area and I just want to go overseas. And, you know, if math was gone, I'd be fine. Okay, that's fine. Like you can put your hands up in the air if even you're in that category. That's okay. But what I've said to those students is, we don't want math to be a closed door for you. We don't want it to become something that holds you back from an opportunity. So an example of this is I've had students where let's say they were really into art, really gifted, and their plan was to go to art school. And so they felt, okay, I don't really need math. So they weren't even doing the minimum. And then at the last minute, they realized a 4-year school would be a better option for them. But now they've got to take the SATs, they've got to take a math general education requirement, all these things. And it becomes this hurdle because they let math kind of become that closed door, and it's keeping them from this great opportunity. So I think that kind of helps kids view it as like, this could catapult you into God's calling, or working hard in this so that it doesn't become a distraction or something that holds you back is going to be worthwhile in the long run. So what we want to do here is we want to set a grand vision for our kids. We don't want to start the year with sort of a ho-hum, like we're already bored and discouraged, like that kind of attitude. And I just want to be real. I get it. I'm headed into this school year with lots of questions, lots of worries, and we have, significant concerns just because of what this year has been. But I am asking the Lord to give me a vision, to give me faith, and I'm trying to intentionally transfer that faith to my kids. So when we start the school year, especially, when we're starting Apologia level 1 math, I'm so excited. I want to start with like this goal of like, look at this book and the math in it, and God's going to help us learn it. And this math is going to teach us more about the Lord's creation. And when we learn about his creation, we learn about him. So I don't typically naturally start from a place of faith. That's not my natural inclination, but I'm asking the Lord to give me faith for the year. And I'm asking the Lord to give you faith for this year as well. And then we can speak that over our kids, these words of faith that God's going to meet us, that it could be fun. It could be way better than we expect. Who knows how far we'll go? We want to have an idea of math for this year so that when we get to the end of the year, we're like, wow, we learned so much math. Look at these facts that we memorized in 3rd grade, and we did all this. Or in middle school, we're like, look at these graphs we were able to do, and we were able to like analyze all this data. And in high school, certainly, you get to the end of an Algebra 2 course, there's a sense of accomplishment. Like, it was hard, but I did it, right? That's the vision that I want. And I want to sort of speak over our homeschool. All right, so that's the first mistake, is that we don't have very much of a vision when we start. And certainly that was sort of how I approached math when I was in school, is just checking the box. And then it ended up being this main part of what God had for me in life. So who knows what he has for your kids? All right, mistake number 2 is a little more concrete. We skip skills. And in the first one, that's when I talked about vision, that's more of a mistake that we make as parents. But this one is, I want to share the ownership here. This can be the parents, and this can also be the student, right? Our kids need to own this as well. As homeschoolers, we have more flexibility. And a lot of the time, that's my favorite part of homeschooling, that we have more flexibility. But you can abuse that. And it can allow you to skip things, or sometimes the less accountability can allow you to get away with some bad habits. So I think you want to be intentional in addressing those. And in math, I have noticed that homeschooled students can skip skills. And I'm really quick to notice this because I did this, right? When I was in school and I'm learning and it's just me and the book, it was easy to gloss over the things that were difficult. So we don't fully learn or practice. And sometimes we don't invest enough time. So for instance, when you get to the end of a section, more so in like middle school or high school, those last problems are harder. When I was doing them, a lot of times I would just kind of skip those last problems. I didn't feel like pressing in and really trying to grapple with them. And I would just kind of like, okay, I'm good. I got the lesson. And instead of challenging myself. In the elementary years, sometimes we don't feel like learning the facts or memorizing our multiplication facts, but you have to do those things and you have to invest time to do it. There's no shortcut. So I'll give you a specific example from my own experience. I told you I sort of learned trigonometry. So when I was taking trigonometry, I ended up with a tutor because it wasn't going well. A wonderful tutor. The problem was me. And she told me, she's like, Katie, you have to learn. You have to memorize your identities. You have to memorize them. And I said, okay, I'm going to memorize them. And then the next week came around. She's like, I can tell you still don't have them memorized. You need to memorize your trig identities. So several weeks go by. I never memorized my trig identities. I just didn't feel like it. I don't know what my issue was. I didn't learn them. When I showed up at the University of Pittsburgh and was trying to muscle through calculus, I was like, oh my goodness, I have to know my trig identities. If I don't know them, I'm never going to be able to do this. So I sat down and I memorized them. I put them all over my dorm room and I memorized it. I remember thinking I had to memorize them. Why didn't I just do it in high school and get it over with? And then I would have probably learned trigonometry well and succeeded in calculus. But instead, I made such procrastination. I made it so much harder for myself. And that's true in a lot of other areas as well, like multiplication facts. I've talked about this on Apologia's page. Like, the farther you push it down the road, it just gets worse. Like, it causes problems in pre-algebra and algebra. You might as well just say third, fourth grade, we are going to put the time in. We're going to play some games, make it fun. We're going to learn these guys and move on. That's kind of my mindset with that. So what's the remedy for skipping skills? What's the opposite? How can we address this mistake? Practice, practice, practice. So the way I view a skill in mathematics is it's something, a computation or something along those lines that you need to be able to do automatically. It's going to be too slow and too clunky to not have it memorized. So not all of mathematics is classified under skills. Something like analyzing a graph is more of conceptual understanding. You don't automatically learn how to analyze a graph. You're always going to have to look at it and process it. But skills are things like multiplication facts, being able to add and subtract with regrouping, being able to calculate the slope when you're given 2 points. When you first learn it, of course, you're going to have pictures and be looking at things and modeling things, but eventually it needs to become automatic, right? So I played basketball. If anyone else, has sports, you can think of it in terms of the drills, right? There's a lot of different aspects to basketball, but things like dribbling and passing and layups, you just practice over and over again. It's not super exciting. No one's like, oh, I'm so excited to do the dribbling drills, but you have to do it in order to become a good basketball player. It's the same way with these skills. You have to do it a little bit at a time over multiple days, and it makes you a great mathematician. And I will just give a little plug for the time aspect of it, because sometimes I think just the root issue is we're not putting enough time into math. You can't short circuit that. So when I taught in the public schools, we did math. I taught Algebra 2 predominantly. We did math 80 minutes a day for the whole school year, 190 days. Now, I'm not saying you should do 80 minutes. I think that was probably a little long, but it was such a solid chunk of time. We did so much practice. We delved deep. We looked at things graphically and in a table. So just to give you a picture on the high school level of sometimes the amount of time that students are investing. At the elementary level, I'm encouraging families who use the Apologia math program. It really should be close to daily if you can. 5 times a week, 4 times a week at a minimum. It's not a subject that we're programmed to learn 2 days a week or in a big chunk on one day. That's not how God designed us. So, and we're doing probably about 30 minutes a day. I mean, it just varies because I don't know how much my little guy is going to focus, but we're doing a lesson and then we're working on skills. In high school, I tell my high school students an hour a day. Most kids need an hour a day to really get through the material. All right. So those are our first 2 mistakes. Mistake number 3, we keep math in the classroom, or as homeschoolers, we keep it in the book, in the notebook. We teach math or we learn math only in the context of school. So we pull out our math book, we do our math, it all stays on the page. It doesn't get applied to our life, and then we put it away. So if you teach math in this way, or if you learn math in this way, it's very boring. It's not super exciting. And I think this really contributes to kids not loving math. I think history or science, sometimes as parents, we can more easily connect it. We can all imagine what a history field trip would look like or what a science field trip. But if I said, did you go on a math field trip? You might be like, I don't even like, what would that be? So this just makes math feel disconnected and isolated and not super exciting. And it's not the purpose of math. So math is in the universe all around us. It's like programmed into the world. And the real reason we're learning math is because it's a part of creation. And anytime we study creation, it helps us learn more about the creator. That's the like deep reason behind it. So we want to be showing kids the connections between math and creation as much as we can. And the easiest way to do this, or the most concrete way to do this, is through projects. I have a bunch of examples to show you because I think what I'm saying will make more sense if I can just show you. So in the Apologia books, how I accomplished this application, the main thing that I did are projects at the end of each unit. This is first grade. This is a project after they've done a unit on addition and subtraction, and they set up their own store. You've probably done something similar like this with your kids. They get to choose what they're selling. Anaya chose books. They price it, and then people go shopping with pretend money. There's coupons, so that's subtraction, all that kind of thing. Really, what a project is a real life scenario that we've controlled and simplified to make it manageable for our kids. Because if you just take them to the grocery store, you've got, decimal points, you've got discounts, percentages, and they're just like, whoa, what's going on? So we're modeling a real life situation, a store, something they're used to, but we're only going to use whole numbers. We're not going to make the numbers too big, that kind of thing. Let me show you another example from Apologia. This is in the second grade books. This is a pizza party. This is the last project in second grade. Oh, so much fun. I just get excited every time I see this one because it was so fun to try it out with these kids that are in the pictures. So we made pizza. We measured. That was part of it. We were like kind of doing fraction exposure, not real in-depth fractions. Then we were dividing the dough. So we were talking about thirds and halves and fourths. We had to put toppings, all these kinds of things. And of course, we applied it by eating the pizza. Another example, this one, I think this is going to be in the third grade book. This is something my family was doing. My husband was dropping a bouncy ball, and we used this as an application for graphs. So he dropped the ball, and those tape marks that you see there, the blue marks, that it's like different heights. And so we recorded it so that we could see how high the ball was bouncing. And then we did a graph. And so it was an application of a line graph. And just so you don't think that all the fun stuff happens in elementary, I have an example here from high school or middle school, depending on what level your kid's in. This would be like an Algebra 1 example. I created a project where kids had to decide if it was cheaper to drive or fly to a destination. So in this project, they're choosing their destination. They're researching how much it costs to fly there. If they drove there, would they need to stay overnight? You're not allowed to do that thing where you just like drive through the night. None of that. How much a hotel room would cost. And they do systems of equations. So 2 equations, and they see if they can find a point of intersection where it's like at this point, at this distance, it becomes cheaper to fly rather than drive. So much fun. And this just really engages kids and gets them excited about mathematics. Okay, last one that I want to talk about is we lower the bar. So sometimes a mistake we can make as parents is when our child hits difficulty or when we hit difficulty in teaching them math, instead of addressing the root issue of the difficulty, we lower the standard. So we find an easier program, or we have them skip certain things, or they lower the bar and they skip things like I talked about earlier. And this just does not set up our kids for success because it limits them. Like I was saying earlier, it limits them in their achievement later on. And I do just want to say here with elementary parents, if we can press for excellence and hard work on the elementary level, it does make it so much easier in the long run to have our kids learn middle school mathematics, high school mathematics, because they have that foundation. There's always an opportunity, to grow and to change. But if you can start your course well in elementary, it makes such a difference. And with lowering the bar, one thing I've seen is sometimes parents will talk to me and they were having challenges, so they switched programs or they went a different direction, and they're like, it's so much easier. And I'm happy for them that it's going more, easier, but I do wonder sometimes if they've compared the table of contents or if they've looked they've looked critically at the program, because not all programs are equal in terms of what they cover in mathematics. Some programs are challenging, but it's because they're covering more math and at a deeper level. So that's just something to consider when you're looking into a program. Is I think the ideal is that it's presenting rich mathematics to our kids, but in a manageable way. And that is how I would say you should address this mistake. Is when you see challenges or when your child is struggling, rather than just changing course, okay, this is too hard, we're not going to do this, it's just too stressful. We want to build stepping stones for them. You can't just like throw your kid across the creek, like, okay, go learn calculus. That doesn't work. It's basically impossible. They're not going to make it. But we want to work backwards and create stepping stones for them so they can get across. My first teaching experience was with students who were several grade levels behind. And I learned this from working with them. And at first, I felt overwhelmed at having to go back with the students to the grade level that they were truly at. It was discouraging. But then what I found is together, if we went back and filled in those skills, it was amazing how much progress we could make. At first, it feels slow, like we're not getting anywhere, we're not getting through the book. But then eventually, since you're filling in those gaps of knowledge, you start to make progress, and then you can even pick up speed. So it ends up just being really exciting to see how far you can go. So those are the 4 mistakes I wanted to share with you. I want to close just by kind of giving a testimony from my own life of God's faithfulness, because in sharing these mistakes, I know as parents, we're trying to avoid the mistakes. We don't want to make any mistakes for our kids. But the truth is, we are going to make mistakes, and we can rest in knowing that God will be there for our kids. When I was in high school, I told my parents I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to go to France. I was all about French. I said nothing about math, so we weren't really excelling in math. And then senior year, I was like, oh, I think I want to be a math major. And so we had made all these mistakes, but God was kind and he provided. He knew that I was going to change courses like that. He made sure that I got the best professor my freshman year. She was such a good professor. She helped me make up all that ground. There was something at Pitt called the Math Assistance Center, and I went there every day freshman year. I went there every day freshman year and sophomore year. Everybody knew me. They all knew my name. They're like, hey, Catherine. And then, in God's kindness and his sense of humor, I ended up working there as a junior and a senior because I did make up the ground. So I just wanted to close by saying that, because I know it can be, overwhelming to think about all these different subjects, but just keep in mind that God will be faithful and he will provide for you and for your kids.